Hello, everybody. You're very welcome to this episode of the podcast. And today I'm joined by Gavin Dixon from Business IT Solutions. Hello, Gavin. Would you like to just introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Certainly, Paul. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Gavin from Bits. I set up Bits way too long ago, 2001, in my youth and naivety. And since then, as I started out as a one-man band, man in a van, as I say, going around doing a bit of IT. And here we are, nearly 25 years later. We've a team of 30 or so. We're based in Kilkenny. We've office in Dublin as well, and we cover basically that whole corridor from Dublin into the southeast of Ireland, doing IT and whatever that's evolved into over that last 20 odd years.
And there has been some changes over the last 25 years in
Yeah.
IT.
Massive, yeah, and it's been massive for everyone. I always kind of think I got lucky, and I don't know you make your own luck, but when as I said, kind of set up my own business and I went out and, at that time you were selling a few laptops or maybe a server but I got into this business at the time when broadband was starting to be rolled out. Most people prior to that, if any of your listeners are old enough to remember using dial-up to get out onto the internet and maybe using your ISDN, and it could be costing you hundreds and hundreds of pounds back in that day. This idea of getting broadband was miraculous and a cost saving. So I kind of got in at that time, got in with small businesses and setting up their broadband, and it kind of led from there. Yeah, it's been an evolution, a revolution in terms of IT, and every business I think relies on it, is touched by it in some way, shape, or form. And I think we've been very lucky to get in and at the start of that explosion, arguably.
And the subject we're talking today is a subject that I don't believe is talked enough about. And it's a subject that, with how the world has changed with AI, with automation, with, as you say, broadband, but it's now everywhere. And the subject is cybersecurity.
Yeah, and look at the reality of it is if you had the foresight back 25 years ago to think, that first step, and I mentioned about broadband, and from that it was more computers and more computing power, and then it was putting your data onto those computers, and then everyone had a server in the corner, and then the first big thing back then was backing up that data. To fast forward to where we are now, maybe very few people would have predicted that how I'm going to use the stereotype of the spotty faced teenager sitting in a room developing a virus that might shut down your computer or whatever turns into a multi-billion-dollar industry for those criminals nowadays. That's just the way it is. I suppose for every opportunity there's out there from a positive point of view, there's always the negative aspect of it, and your data is actually really important. And I think for the audience you have in terms of accountants' data, because they have access into so many of their clients' data, it becomes a potential real opportunity for a criminal out there to exploit and get that data because it is very valuable nowadays. Yeah.
Yeah. And I pose a question to you today that I came across recently. And the question is, or it's a statement more so than a question, that every business is a tech business.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I think the reality of it is, and I think the more we see businesses getting their head around what the risks are out there, and the more they rely on IT to do their day-to-day job, then yeah, I mean, every business is a tech business. And not only that, but cybersecurity isn't just an IT department's problem. It's the company's problem. It's a company-wide problem, and the rest on the shoulders of the company owners. Because ultimately, and there's loads of statistics out there, but if you get attacked and you get ransomware and all of a sudden your business can't operate, then you're losing money. And in some cases, you might lose your business. And that's the sad reality of it. And thankfully, that doesn't happen because that's the extreme example. But there's so many other examples in between. And even if your business is out for a day or two or a week or two, it's huge money potentially lost by that company.
It's reputational damage every bit as much as the physical and financial damage as well, though, isn't it?
Huge. Yeah. And I think you hit on this at the very start that, people don't really talk about cybersecurity. Well, you may be very sure that people don't really talk about those instances where they have been hacked, even on a very low scale. And it's kind of needed. I think people need to be able to put their hand up and go, you know what, we got attacked and this is what we learned from it, because the next person then will learn from it. I could talk to our customers, and I can tell you these threats are real. They're happening week in, week out. And it wouldn't be a week goes by in our team, and we're a relatively small IT business, where we don't have a customer ring up going, I don't know what's happening, but something's going wrong here. And it could be from the smallest thing to the biggest thing.
And in terms of something going wrong, like, I mean, just imagine the scenario there where you come in tomorrow morning, you walk into your business, and it can be a business on a high street, it can be a business anywhere. And the next thing you switch on your computers and you can't get into your system. We see that a lot recently in terms of Microsoft or Google or, Microsoft Teams going down worldwide. And, it is a real threat today. And it's not just a real threat for the likes of Microsoft, it's a real threat for the likes of your mom and dad business and your day to day and your small operator business who are using a phone to collect their money or.
Yeah, it's crossed the whole business now, and that comes back to what your point was, Paul, about the fact that every business is a tech business. Like it goes across, it touches every part of the business, be it from you trying to get your credit card payments in or trying to pick up the phone to make a call. And the reality of it is, yeah, there's so many services behind your business that you're running, and yes, they can be attacked. The reality is, the Microsofts of this world, the Googles of this world, the Amazons of this world, they have a hell of a lot more resources to try and protect their infrastructure compared to you and I or the mom and pop business or the high street business because that's their game and they have to be better than us at the very least when it comes to making sure the security is right. They're never going to be 100% right. There will be outages. But I think what most small business owners don't really admit or maybe don't like to admit, or maybe the best way of saying it is they might just think, oh, shit, that'll never happen to us. Why would somebody attack me? Yeah,
That's a very, very, very,
yeah,
very critical piece of information where, this only happens to the big businesses. This only happens to a massive big organization. And you'll see it on a TV
yeah,
show, a cybersecurity TV show or something where you're looking at these people being attacked. But in fact, in the reality is they're attacking, every single type of a business that holds data. And that data, you might not have any concept of what that data or why it's valuable, but it's valuable through identity theft, it's valuable through supplier information, it's valuable through sales information. So all that information is valuable to somebody else beside you and your customer information. And even from the point of view of the feeling that you've been breached or the feeling that you've had that issue out there. So what are the simple obvious things? For me, the way I explain it in my own head for cybersecurity. So say you have your home at home, you have your house at home, right? And with your house, you have your site, you have your house, you have your four walls, you have your windows, you have all of this stuff going on. So how do you protect that? You put an alarm system in around your house to protect your home, right? And what I'm saying here is the cybersecurity, whereas it's an alarm system for your business that you're wrapping around the outside of your business. And when you wrap that around the outside of your business, that's actually making sure that you're doing what you can do to protect your business. And can you just talk about that and explain the simple little things that people can do?
yeah. I love that analogy as well because it's one that everyone can identify with, and we use it the whole time. And the reality is, your cybersecurity is a multi-layered approach. So to go back to that analogy with the house, it's not just making sure that the windows close, but there's actually a lock on them. It's making sure that you have an alarm system that you set, and you don't just sit. It doesn't just sit there doing nothing. It's proactive. You're proactive with it by setting it at night. You set it when you leave in the morning, and there's nobody left in the house. We also kind of say there's no point in doing half-assed measures, if you don't mind me saying that. But the
Yeah.
reality is, there's no point in locking all the windows and leaving the front door half open or unlocked, you know. And sometimes people kind of go, well, no, sure, I have antivirus or I have a password
You've heard that,
policy.
have you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in this game a long time, Paul, and the reality is that that multi-layered approach is required, and that just all that means is you just take it a little bit more serious. You just kind of go, okay, I can honestly say, if I was to ask all anybody listening, and I'm not going to even ask you, I'm not going to put you on the spot, right? But if you put it from this point of view, how many people are using a password to log into something on their work computer that they're also using maybe for logging into their own personal device or their own personal apps. So somebody using a password to get into Instagram or into Facebook or into Twitter, I guarantee you there's a high percentage that use the same password or a very, very slight variation of that password to get into what they do in work. So when we talk about protecting things at a very basic level, and I talk about passwords, even just putting in a password policy into your company that says it has to be this long, has to be changed this often, it has to have special characters in it. It has to. A lot of people don't implement that very basic thing. Having a firewall that's kept up to date, so the security is up to date on the firewall. If you're running a business, you have, again, that's the analogy of, you might have said, "Oh, we're great with passwords," but that's like leaving the door open if you haven't fixed the firewall side of it. And they're just two very simple things. Like everybody, more than likely everybody has all of their emails sitting up in the cloud now, be it through Microsoft or Gmail or something like that. The reality is, when you're logging into those things, you should have multi-factor authentication turned on. It should be a basic thing. Yeah.
And for somebody that doesn't understand what MFA is, can you just explain to people what multi-factor authentication
Yeah,
is?
I will as best I can. And that this is the reality of it as well. The people are probably seeing this more and more in their day-to-day lives. They're seeing stuff happening where they get a text message to their phone after they log into something. Because you put your password into whatever, and then you'll get a text message, and it's usually 4 or 6 digits that you have to put in. And that's now a second layer of authentication. Your first layer was your password. The second layer now is actually that 6 digit code that they send you in your text message. Even that is getting flawed now because there's other ways that the bad guys have hacked into doing that. So this is why we start using an authenticator app. But that is a very basic example of what more than one layer of authentication is, multi-layered, in that you have a password, but then you also have this 4 or 6 digit code to authenticate who you are, to let you into what you're trying to get into.
And the simple things that we're talking about here are things that every business, when they're starting on this journey, they should actually really do. Like when we look at businesses, we look at risk profiling in the business. Like where's the biggest risk for a business owner today? Like where, like, people will say, well, if I don't have enough insurance and if something happens to somebody, this is another form of insurance that you need to have.
Absolutely.
But like,
Mm.
if our IT system goes down, we're out of business. And I can tell you that, of our businesses, there's probably 60% of the businesses that will go down if they don't have a robust, strong protection mechanism and cybersecurity policy within their business.
Yeah.
And things like multi-factor authentication, we just need to take that seriously. Things like password, there's a number of password protectors out there. We've put in one password, but there's loads of other ones there, and we ran that across the whole organization. And people, they tend to say, "Oh no, not another thing, not another thing, not another thing." But the question is that now they begin to know that they can store their stuff into one password, and
Yeah.
and it's the main focus of this. And for us, like if we have a staff member coming in, and then that staff member leaves, from a security perspective, we can close down the whole account with one from one managerial side of this. So again, it's multi-factored, but it's also multi-factored in the instance that as a business owner, you're looking for these areas that can say, yes, here's the vulnerabilities. So if I'm looking for the vulnerable things that in the business there, then I'm looking for the simple solutions. So the basic simple solutions are passwords. Make sure, first of all, you have a password on everything, right? Second, it's not the same password, obviously. Third thing in terms of that is understand multi-factor authentication. And these are by just doing these couple of things, and then you can have a third layer, which is you have to get the digits off a certain, off that multi. They're the basic, like they're the things like third party insurance on your car. It's not comprehensive
Yeah.
insurance.
And you know what? There's one that's regularly missed as well. Actually, this comes back to the point a few minutes ago. There's so many layers to it. The statistics are out there, right? That somewhere between 65, 70% of attacks that happen are successful because of human error, right? It's not because of the technology, right? So, and that's
Yeah.
because the technology has got some sort of levels built into it. But if you ignore certain things on the technology, that statistic will go higher. So, for example, keeping your computers up to date. And I don't mean going out and buy one every year. I mean running patches on them. Microsoft, as an example, they're all in the same boat. But the vast majority of our customers anyway use Microsoft. A Microsoft device, when you buy a computer, Windows 11, it's never fully um, bulletproof, to use that expression. You will have to download updates. Now, the system should update themselves automatically, but some people might have to click next, and some people might not do that. But so just running patches on your computers that fix known vulnerabilities. That means when they shipped that PC out of the box into your business, at that moment in time, it might have been okay leaving the factory, but in the month it took to get from the factory into your office or more, there's been some issues arising, what we call patches, that little pieces of software that need to be released to fix that problem. It's free to use. You go in and you run your security updates on your computer, and it just brings it up to a level that makes it secure. And that's a very basic thing for people to do.
But they have found somebody has attacked and there's a vulnerability there, and the patch means they've fixed that vulnerability, and they're now asking you to update your system to make sure that your system is updated.
Correct. Yeah.
And we're talking here about the basics, the main simplified basics that people can do
Yes.
without having an IT firm that they have hired for the business. And it's not a sales thing. You're on here
Mm.
today because I've asked you to come on. But I do believe that every business should have a strong IT, and it's so specialized now. It's not something that, as you said, the teenager can do in the bedroom
Mm.
to make sure that you're patching. Because if I look at the things that we use in the office, right, we all use our phones. There's various different, there's some people use Apple, some people use all the other different systems. And the question is that the phones are very vulnerable in terms of an attack as well. And if you have your work email on your phone, therefore you're able to be, it's vulnerable there. So it's an extra layer there to make sure that you're actually protecting that device. But there's things like watches. I have an Apple Watch on me here now. That Apple Watch can send me a lot of information. And there's so many. I mean, we've recently heard of a story where there was a vending machine in a large production firm that ordered parts, and that vending machine was on the open Wi-Fi, and something got into that Wi-Fi, and that attacked the system. So they're looking for the softest way to get into the system, and they have a way of checking all of that. Back to the analogy where you have your house is locked down, then there's a layer of a protection around that, but then you have to have another layer of protection around your car. You have to have another layer of
Yeah.
protection around this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
people don't want to actually have to really, they don't think about this because it's not what they do. I think educating people on this now, as the world has become a lot more IT orientated with the rise of blockchain technologies, digital currencies, digital assets, all of this stuff is there now. So this is not going away. Like, this is something that's here to stay for the future. Talk to me about this thing called phishing mails, and this is a very simple vulnerability that crops up.
To your point as well about just to, I'm going to jump up to the conversation about fishing, but just your point about the business owner should just focus on doing their job because that's what they're good at, and always have a chat with somebody outside of that who's good at their job. So arguably, I might say, oh yeah, that's us. But other IT businesses like us, if that's our job from 24/7, or at least Monday to Friday, but IT security is a 24/7 thing, then business owners should stick and be good at what they're doing and not try and take on so much more, because that's when something could drop. If you've too many spinning plates, one of them might drop, and that could be the cybersecurity one that dropped. So I would agree with you in terms of, you can do some of the basics right, but to try and put that responsibility on a business owner to have everything right and try and get all those layers right, have a conversation with somebody in my game, and you'll, at the very least, you'll learn something from that as the next best thing to do, or what's the right plan to put in place. But in terms of phishing, goes back to what I said a few minutes ago. Like nearly 70% of those attacks that are successful are those attacks that come in through a human interaction. It's usually human error. Education is key. You've just said that as well. And what you're really educating people for is to watch out for and spot a potentially dodgy email. And we've, again, to talk about the evolution of cybersecurity, it's not the Nigerian prince offering you a few million just to give your bank details, because it's evolved, and it's now evolving faster than ever because of AI. The bad guys are using it. Would have been relatively easy 2 or 3 years ago to spot a phishing email that would have been spelling mistakes in it. Would have been pretty. There might have been a couple of obvious errors in it.
Yeah,
Nowadays, AI doesn't allow for errors. So the bad guys use AI for their gain. They now go to ChatGPT or Copilot and they say, okay, I want to know as much as I can about accountants in Wexford, and maybe RDA come up on the list. And then, okay, now it's going to say, I want to know as much about the principal in RDA. And it might be you, obviously. Now I want to find out as much as I can about Paul Redmond. And it can keep getting deeper and deeper. And now all of a sudden, I know I can potentially mimic your email address send it to somebody who works in the organization and make a request for €20,000 to be transferred into this bank account, and it has to be done with urgency. And people can spoof those emails. People can make it look like it's really coming from Paul and make up a scenario. Maybe they've figured out how to
You're scaring me now.
but the reality is that if we're using AI for any good, there's other people going to be using it for bad. And I suppose it can get down to that level. That's a very targeted attack and that's a very specific thing.
And it's what happens on a daily
And it does
basis.
happen. But you think about it as well, an awful lot of the stuff that the criminals are using is automated. They are throwing thousands and thousands of emails out in there into the wild, hoping that somebody clicks on it. They only have to be right once, whereas you or we have to be right the whole time. We have to make sure all of those layers are in place, but they only have to get through once. And what happens in a phishing email is somebody opens an email and they get duped into clicking something they shouldn't. And they think that what they're getting is authentic. And that's basically it. It might say that your Microsoft password's about to expire, click here. And it brings them to a website that looks like it's the Microsoft website because they've duped that website. They've duplicated it and made it look like it's the real thing. And now I put in my username, my password, bang, they're in. They have my details. And that's enough to get into my email account in the cloud. And now all of a sudden I've access to data. And what can I do with that? It opens up a whole realm of opportunity for the criminal.
And that's a simplicity way of how they can get in, and it's a brilliant analogy where they only have to be right once. In terms of that. So we have talked about the simple things that people can do in terms of multi-factor, strong passwords, regular backups is another huge
Huge.
part of this,
Yeah.
making sure and a lot of this antivirus and updating your system with patchworks that are there. The other thing, I suppose, low cost options would be education of your own team.
Yes.
Making sure that you understand that if you're in the Google ecosystem and if you're in the Microsoft, that you're in one of those two main systems. Like there is protection there if you actually use the protection. So I
Correct. Yeah.
mean, and that's the biggest part here. Like this is not a scaremongering exercise. There are solutions here that within the Microsoft system themselves, which is what we use, there is a lot of layers that we can do, and we've been working consistently over a number of years with G to get our Microsoft system as protected as much as you possibly can in terms of what's available within that. And like I would imagine that they're spending billions in terms of, and I don't mean millions, I mean billions in terms of protecting, because that's their job is to make sure that people have the confidence in their system
Yeah.
that they can go out and do it. So that's the things that you can do. And we've also discussed the data loss. We've talked about, what happens to the reputation and the disruption in the business. But let's just talk a little bit about what happens if you have an attack. What do you do? What's the first 10 minutes? For me, the things that you've talked to us about, there's three pillars of this, which is containment, eradication, and recovery,
Hmm.
right? They're the three pillars that you work off in the event of attack. What do you do and what's the first 10 minutes look like?
And after you stop screaming for the first couple of minutes, this is something a lot of people forget actually. But some businesses, and it's become an increasing number, have cybersecurity insurance. And those who do, the actual first thing they do is ring their insurance company because they have to be notified immediately, and usually the insurance company then will have a strategic plan as to what they should do next. And if that is engage your IT provider, or if that is shut down all the computers, if that is so, if you have cyber insurance, in order to not invalidate your insurance, ring your insurance company first. If you don't have cyber insurance, the very first thing you do is you will have to isolate what's going on. You would have to try and disconnect computers. So you'll shut down the internet connection, or you'll shut down the computer or computers that are affected. You will more than likely have to reach out to a professional at that point, because once you've plugged everything out and your business is now not working and not functioning, so you have to then do something about it. So you have to try and stop, and that comes back to those three pillars, the containment of it. You have to stop this thing spreading, because if it hasn't hit the whole company, and regularly it's the case, it will only get in. A ransomware attack would be a really good example. It'll only get in maybe at the server level, or it'll only get in at one computer, but it can spread through the network. So as soon as you can, you contain it. And if that means the nuclear option of plugging everything out and shutting down your internet connection, now you've started to contain it. The second thing then is to try and eradicate it. So you have to identify, and this is where it slows down, because now you have to find out, well, how many devices are impacted. Is it just one? Is it the whole organization? And it could be just the server, but the server is where all the data is. So in that instant, you've kind of tried to contain it. You then have to move on to, well, we have to identify where it is and how far spread it is. There's something like we work with a lot of accountants, so we've seen that there's some accountants they are fully in the cloud, as we would say, but in the industry that you're in, the reality of it is an awful lot of companies are in a hybrid mixed sort of setup. They have a bunch of data that's sitting up in the cloud, but they also, because of maybe legacy third-party apps or apps that they're using, have to have a server on-prem as well. So in that scenario, you've got a more complex network, you've a more complex setup. So if the attack happened on your local network on your server, how do you know then that hasn't gone up into the cloud as well? Depending on your structure and what infrastructure you have in the cloud and all the rest of it, there's a few unknowns in the scenario we're talking about. But you'd have to check everything. You do not want this thing spreading into your cloud environment. You want to make sure you've stopped it spreading. In that containment heading, you want to eradicate it, and that's where the hard work gets in. You want to get in, get rid of what's causing it, and then the real work begins, I suppose. After that, it's the recovery. It's getting things back up and running. And you hit it on it a few minutes ago, and we didn't actually probably give it enough of attention. Backups. I mean, it probably wrongly is something I take for granted, but you can't and shouldn't take backups for granted, because if the proverbial hits the fan and you have to say, I can't trust turning that computer back on, then I need to wipe that computer. How do I get things back? And you can only get things back if you have a backup.
And I suppose for people that are listening that are not really aware of this, just imagine the scenario we had when COVID started.
Mm.
It's the very same. Like there was containment, so you had to lock yourself away in your home, and you know what I mean. You tried to eradicate it, and then you went through your recovery process. And it's a very, very
Yeah, it's a good
like
analogy. Yeah.
they call
Yeah.
this. Well, they call this a virus, like, or if a virus gets into your computer or that side of it as well, it's the exact same protocol. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying we're humanoid computers, even though they're not a million miles away. But what I am saying to you is that having an emergency plan in place, you know, it's not that it's something that you might like to have. It's something that you should have. And the risk planning within your business, if you're not considering your risk planning, because as we said earlier on, every business is a tech business. If you're not having consideration around what your risk planning in your business for this is, and this is only the initial stages of this, then you've containment, eradication, recovery. You have your three phases, but there's another huge part, which is your reporting obligations. So as a business owner, like you have some very, very serious reporting obligations to, you have GDPR, you know what I mean? You have the Garda Crime Squad, which need to be reported on this. You also have the Data Protection Commissioner. So you have three very, very serious areas that you need to understand within your businesses. What's the stages of that? So you know, if you pick up the phone and you ring your local Garda branch, they will put you through to the cybersecurity policy. Then you know if you have a good IT team, they like yourselves, they will guide you down this area of the reporting obligations.
The reality of it is, and it's the sad reality, that businesses like ours have experienced this. We've seen it. We know the process and the procedures now. So when you get to that obligation stuff, the GDPR legislation that came in a few years ago, you have 72 hours to report this as soon as you know about it. And if you don't, you're technically in breach of that. The reasons why are all very legitimate, but you've got potentially had a breach where personal data has been accessed. So everybody's personal data, anybody who might be on that list, is absolutely entitled to know about it.
And you have to report it to the customers or the clients or the people as well.
Exactly. And that comes back to the reputational damage that you mentioned. And all of those things, it's kind of like you're still reeling from the impact of having had this happen to you. That doesn't negate your obligations to report it. And a lot of people kind of go, well, I'm still busy in doing this, fixing this. I'm very blinkered on this. I'm trying to get my business back up and running again. That doesn't matter. You still have those obligations. And the whole idea here's a very simple thing that somebody pointed out to me as we were going through the process of making sure we had an emergency response plan, right? An emergency response plan, it's something that we can kick in when the snow falls and we can't all get to work, and what's, plan B? It could be power outage in your office and everyone has to work from home, but it could be that you walk in some morning and that all the systems are off. And as an IT guy saying this, it's great and all having your plan, but it's no good if it's stuck in your computer. Have it printed out, have it in your drawer, have another copy at home, because sometimes you won't be able to get into your computer systems, and there is your blockage to actually saying, actually, what's our plan? Our leadership team needs to be aware. Our employees need to be aware not to come to the office. We have a plan B, and we can get something up and running again. If the plan A is it's not business as usual, then what's the next step on it?
And you can replicate your COVID plan.
Yeah,
Yeah, you replicate your COVID
in
plan.
effect, yeah.
This is the things that, that are, it's very, very similar when you're replicating that. The other kind of things that are out there that are that are not spoken about is there's a massive impact on your team. You know what I mean? If you've been a team member and you're the one that you've been hacked, or you've a particular area, like there's a very, very strong personal feeling of that it's somebody's fault. This is not somebody's necessary. You know what I mean? This is not about fault, blame, right or wrong. This is about understanding that there are people out there who are looking, they're criminals out there. So therefore, if somebody come in and stole money from your business or stole something, you would be saying to yourself, well, it's very obvious that this is a crime. It's not as obvious to people at the moment that the cyber issues is a crime, but it actually is a crime.
Yeah, the only people that are wrong in this is the guys who are carrying out the attack and who are doing the damage, because that the analogy you've used is perfect. Like, if somebody breaks into your office or into your shop and takes some money out of the till, nobody says, well, Jesus, who put the till there? Or, that's just not done. And it comes back to the point I made earlier on. I don't think enough businesses who have had an impact from a cyber incident are talking about it, because if they do, the next person will, and they'll learn from it. Well, why did that happen? What did you do? What could we do better? And the more we get used to talking about it, the less of that stigma that goes with it. But you're absolutely right. It has an impact on the team. You will always see people kind of going, Jesus, that could have been me, in terms of, because there's always somebody somewhere. I go back to that human element of it. Somebody was the unfortunate one who it might have come in through. The attack came in through something. And that guilt or whatever goes with it. But then other people start kind of thinking, Jesus, we are really vulnerable then, aren't we? Like, we're only as good as our last cyber incident, really, in that sense. And you do have to kind of focus on getting the business back up and running in that whole recovery mode. You do have your obligations to report, as we already talked about. But then you have to sit down with the team and have the chat, have an honest discussion about, what went wrong. Comes back down to education. What could we have done better? It's like analyzing it post incident, without making it sound too, I don't know, corporate or whatever, but literally, kind of sitting down and kind of go, right, folks, we've had this incident. This is what we think, or this is what we know happened. So we want everyone to know about it, because we want to make it better the next time. We want to make sure this doesn't happen the next time. And it's nobody's fault, because these things happen and they will continue to happen in businesses across Ireland, across the world. It is not going away anytime soon.
And for me as a business owner and aware of this, cyber issue that's going on out there, all I can say is that we've been working with you and your team and your in terms of an annual review and a biannual quarter reviews and stuff, and you've been very forthcoming and upfront about telling us what's going on, and we've built that trust there working together. But the other thing I'll say, if it happens to somebody, remember there's loads of help out there.
Yeah,
You know what
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
mean? Like, the question is, do not bury your head under the sand and ignore this thing that it's happened, because this definitely will snowball if you don't, solve or understand what the issue is. And don't assume that if you pick up the phone, there's nobody out there to help you. Even if you don't, even if you're not a customer of Gavin or his team, you can certainly pick up the phone and they will be there to help. I can guarantee that, because I just know the caliber of people that are there. So they will pick up the phone and they will put a plan in place and they will help you. You're also, I would encourage people to look at the cybersecurity policy for your business, no matter what type of business. Talk to your insurance brokers. They're there, they will help you. You can pick up the phone to the likes of the Data Protection Commissioner. Like, they're not, it's not the big bad wolf out there. Like, you've been injured in this as well. If you've done everything that you possibly can to protect the business and protect yourselves, there's nothing more you can do. So the question I'm saying is just put something in place. Be aware that within your business that this is a risk, and it's a real risk, and it's possibly one of the most underplayed risks that people don't even think about, because you will say to yourself, well, I do this job X, Y, or Z, and I don't really have much, much issues with that. So why, how could I be at risk? I'm only a one man operation, and you're the one man operation that's potentially the highest risk, because you won't have considered this as a risk, and that's the part. Also, the idea of this podcast is to educate. And if there is an attack, don't panic. Just understand that there's loads of people out there to help. Is there anything you'd like to add, Gavin? Would you like to just tell us a little bit about what yourself and what your team can do for people?
Yeah, well, look, thanks very much for your reference of us in terms of what we've done for you. And I suppose that's the key as well, is building a relationship and working together. It's worked really well for us. But we have and do pick up the phone to people who we have never worked with before, and we're able to help because, and I go back to that point I made earlier, unfortunately, we've experienced it on behalf of others. We've kicked in. We've had to kind of we have a similar client emergency plan internally, so that if we do get one of those phone calls, we have a team ready to go. We have a cybersecurity team internally. We know the steps to take. There is help out there, and I suppose from our point of view, and this comes back to, like, in your industry, you have your continuous professional development. You go to your courses. You do what you have to do to deliver the best for your customers. It's the exact same for us. We get all our training. Our guys are we put a huge amount of effort on our guys getting trained up, continually trained up, because these things change the whole time. Making sure that we're able to deliver the most up-to-date stuff, critical stuff that needs to be implemented first. If we're working for somebody for the first time, we go in and we'll do an audit, and we'll have the traffic light report, and we kind of go, these are good, these could be better, but these red ones, we have to deal with these right now, because they're like leaving your front door open type analogy. And from that point of view, I suppose, don't feel that you have to take all this on. Don't feel like the burden of that in an incident happening and then it all falling on you and feeling you can't pick up the phone is definitely not what I'm in this game for. I want to help people. I want to make sure people are protected and try and keep the bad guys out. And go back to that point again, like, you have to have everything right all the time. They only have to be right once. If I was to pick the three or four big things that you can do without talking to an IT professional at all, it's your MFA passwords thing that we talked about, regular backups, but don't just take them, but test them, make sure the backup is real. Because when people say, like, oh yeah, I'm running a backup every night, and you go look at it and you go, actually, that hasn't run in a year. Um, so take your backup and give your staff some training. Give them an education around what they should and shouldn't be clicking on, what they should and should look out for, what looks dodgy. You could get it online. I'm sure there's plenty of courses and education out there for staff around what they should or shouldn't do. And what one of the big things I think in that one area, if I could say it, is that sometimes employees click something and kind of go, "Oh God, should I click that?" and don't say anything.
Yeah,
That's the worst thing that can happen, because it's better, as you've already said, put your hand up and go, you know what, I clicked something there about 10 minutes ago, and now that it's after getting in here and I'm after thinking about it, and there's a little red flag. Even if that red flag turns out to be nothing, I'd rather somebody put their hand up and said it, because we can check it out then and see if it was something or not. But we have had incidents where we've 3 or 4 days later been called in because somebody clicked on something, and when you actually talk to the employee in question, they go, I kind of thought that, kind of, that niggled at me. If it's niggling at you, say it.
yeah. That if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, it's probably
Exactly. So it's making the atmosphere in making cybersecurity a thing that you just chat about it, and trying to make it okay just for people to raise their hand and go, you know what, that mightn't be right. I'll talk to somebody about that.
Well, I want to say thank you so much. I really enjoy these type of conversations because we get deep into a subject that potentially is not spoken about enough, often enough. And thank you so much. I'm sure the listeners will really enjoy this.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
So thank you very much.